What's going on, y'all? Welcome back. I want to dive into a topic that I found incredibly relevant and helpful for me, which is the concept of facing our fears. So, I was watching the Pivot podcast recently, and Stephen A. Smith was on there. Now, if you don't know, Stephen A. Smith is a highly dominant sports analyst. At this point, he's probably the most popular sports analyst there is. And he decided to then venture into acting. And I found this interesting because being at the top of his game to then jump into another lane where he is starting fresh, he's starting new, right? That comes with mistakes, that comes with failures. It comes with criticism, critique, right? A lot of things. And he chose to still challenge himself in this new way, regardless of what may happen from the public. I found that incredibly inspiring and therefore chose to have a further conversation about this. And so for me, back in the days, fear showed up in multiple ways, but a lot of it was like I would just lie to myself and say I wasn't interested in doing something that I knew I wanted to do, that I didn't like something, right? I just wouldn't engage with it to keep myself from failing. I remember at one point, I wasn't a big fan of public speaking. It's just something that I never really enjoyed. I didn't really think about it much when I did it, and I've always been doing it since I was in like my 20s. But for whatever reason, once I became like 25, I had this like immense feeling that I wasn't able to fail, that I had to be perfect. Every time I spoke in front of people, everything had to be spot on and perfect with no imperfections at all. And that's just an unrealistic standard. And as you can imagine, that ended up weighing on me a lot and it ended up limiting me a lot. So, after much effort, much work, surrounding myself with the right people, and really shifting my mindset into a growth mindset, with which we discussed, I was able to start conquering and facing my fears. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what some of those may be today. But the hope is that with these 4 steps and 4 tips that I have to help you face your fears, you can too align yourself and start conquering and facing the fears that may be holding you back. All right, so if this sounds interesting, let's go ahead and stick with me as we get into it. The first step I would recommend, as always, is clear reflection, right? Figure out what are the actual fears that you're facing and that are showing up in your life and how they're showing up, right? This is just like we've discussed in the past around feedback. This is incredibly important to accept the real reality. You can't be delusional here, and you got to be honest with yourself. If you are limiting yourself, if you're saying that you don't like something, that you aren't interested in something that you deep down want to do, you have to be real with yourself. You have to own it and place that in that mind map to say, you know what, I want to conquer this fear now, right? And so this reflection point is just to highlight what are the things that I may be fearing that could be causing me to block my own success. Right. So, as I mentioned before, if public speaking is one of those things, right? How is that showing up? For me, I was avoiding facilitating certain things. I was avoiding speaking at certain events where I could have been the highlight, where I could have gotten further connections. I could have made a deeper impact instead of living in my fear. Right. And so the moment we accept the reality that we are, in fact, being run by fear versus this lack of interest, then we can start moving forward. And so this reflection is incredibly important. Make sure you spend some good amount of time on it and just flush out the fears you believe could be hindering you. So step number 2 is identify the top fears. So at this point, you've done your mind map. You have a bunch of fears that you've probably highlighted. I want you now to pick the top 2 to 3. Right. Pick those top 2 to 3 fears and highlight a little bit more about how they may be impacting you. So again, if public speaking is one of them, what limitations come from that fear of public speaking? Right? Are you avoiding specific opportunities? List those, right? What opportunities can come if you decide to conquer that fear? So reflect a little bit on that, right? And that's why you selected these fears, because they can maximize the impact. Okay. So let's make sure we identify the top fears that you hope to tackle and can maximize the most impact in your life. Step number 3 is creating your fear fighting plan. So you've highlighted the top fears you want to tackle. This next piece is about highlighting the opportunities for you to work and tackle those fears. So, for example, if public speaking is something you want to work on, perhaps there's a meeting during the week that you don't like speaking in or that you tend to be nervous about. practice there, right? Look forward to challenging your fears there. If it's another challenge, then maybe you'll find it another opportunity. But there's a ton of opportunities in our day-to-day lives to conquer these fears in small ways. This is what we're working on. We're going to highlight these small opportunities throughout our weeks to be able to practice and challenge our fears, because those little wins add up. Step number 4 in facing your fears is making sure that you calendar these commitments. You've highlighted the opportunities to practice your fear facing challenges. Now the goal is to schedule them in, making sure you stick to that schedule and that commitment consistently. It doesn't matter how you feel. You may not be comfortable every week or every day, but you have to try. You have to put in that effort. And trust me, those small wins add up. So, as an example, in the past, I wasn't really comfortable with videotaping myself. Right. And so, in order to face this challenge, I realized that like I was limiting myself. I decided to start recording myself on a daily basis. So, for the last 4 to 6 months, I've been recording myself. I've been putting an effort to try to make some video content, not just to make content, but to more so challenge myself and overcome my fear of being imperfect. Right. And so, as I tell you all to go ahead and make this happen, I am literally living it. Right. Like these are things that I'm trying and practicing in real time. And so, I hope that you are able to accomplish similar things with the tools and the help that I provided. So that's it. Those are my 4 steps for facing your fears. Now, remember, this is a journey, right? We're taking small steps every day to conquer our fears. You can check in a couple weeks, a couple months, and you'll realize like how far you've gotten, right? But the goal here is to not allow fear to control us, to limit the life we're able to create for ourselves, or to limit ourselves based off of what other people may think of our imperfections and failures, right? We need to fail forward. We need to embrace failing, because that's where learning happens. And so that's the goal here. Make sure you face your fears. And if you need any additional support, feel free to check out vividvisioncoaching.net or check out more of our content and videos. Stay tuned for more support. See y'all later. Peace.